It is now time to elevate.
Time to motivate them.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in for the first ever episode of Engage, Motivate, and Elevate with Monet Fox. I am your host, Monet Fox, and we're going to dig right in. Today, I have a super special guest with me. She was important for me because I understand the stigmas that get placed around a lot of people of color with mental illness, health and wellness, going to see a therapist about things that they may have experienced in their life. And so please help me welcome Vanessa Santos. Hey, Vanessa.
Thank you, Monet.
How's everything going?
Everything's good. Outside is closed, but we're good.
Yeah. I mean, it stinks that we can't be in person, but at least you get to see some of my, native artwork in the back. I get to see.
I love it. Nice.
Yeah. So that's cool. So what I want to start with is just letting people know, who you are, where you come from, what kind of led you into this field. So I know that you're a social worker, you're a clinical social worker, but I want to talk a little bit more of how you got started in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Dorchester. I grew up in the Bowdoin Street, almost Four Corners area of Dorchester. And, growing up, being Cape Verdean, we put this huge emphasis on education, and that your route is, high school, college, and then anything post-grad, but that you're doing something that's going to be professional. So I had that in sort of my upbringing, that's likely what I was going to be doing, but I grew up in the hood. So I also knew that there was I thought there was only so far that I could go. I grew up sort of hanging out with the guys, and because of that, there were plenty of times where I had to run home because I could see that there was a shooting that was about to happen. Lost many friends growing up, and we grew up in the same neighborhoods that everybody else did. Drug-ridden, poverty, low socioeconomic statuses. I saw all of that. At the same time, I saw the beauty around me as well. I saw how resilient we were. I saw how resourceful we were. I saw how savvy we were. And I kept all of that with me. And so I knew that I was always going to go into the helping field. And I wanted to do that. And I think a lot of people who go into this work and really do it for real, I hope I swear a lot. So.
It's fine. It's fine. Go ahead. Say what you need to.
Oh my God, my language is pretty colorful. So, we go into this because we've gone through shit ourselves. And so when you've gone through your own set of traumas, if you get this calling of this urge or something that tells you you need to work on this because you're going to be helping people through this as well. So I feel like this career wasn't actually something that I think it was my calling. I think it was something that was just sort of bestowed on me and said, this is what you're going to be doing. And unfortunately, these are some of the experiences that are going to prepare you to do this work.
Yeah. I think it's really important, though, that you acknowledge that this is something that was a calling for you. I think it's really important and relevant because it speaks to testimony. It speaks to your own personal experience. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I even decided to start the podcast because, I've always kind of had the gift to gab, right? But it was always very important for me. I'm a collaborative soul. I want people to be able to understand where support lies, how they can get help. And I think that a lot of that has to do with me feeling very isolated in my life, not having resources, not having a strong support system to say, hey, you can go and get help in this, or you can go and get, a little bit more direction from these people. That was something that's always been kind of lacking in my life. So I really respect when people, have a calling and it's so passionate within them that they are driven to move, and I think that it makes it more sincere. I think that it makes it a lot more palatable for people to kind of come in and receive you as somebody that, she understands my story. She knows what I've been through. And, you talked about the area that you grew up in. I remember funny thing, right? Two things. One is when I was in high school, everyone thought I was Cape Verdean, you know, and when I would go back and forth to New York, people were like, what is Cape Verdean?
Right, like, what is that?
Yeah, no one knew.
I made it up. No,
Right. No one knew what it was. It's like, no, you must be Indian or you're Spanish, or, you know, they try to kind of like realign you with a different culture, which I always thought was kind of funny and weird. And I have a really good, a bunch of friends that are Cape Verdean, and we always like laugh and joke about that. It's like everyone always kind of wonder, well, who are you and where do you come from? So for those of you that don't know, Cape Verde Islands is off the coast of Africa. Correct me if I say
no, you're right. Yeah,
and
the west part of Africa.
The western part, okay. But you are mixed with Hispanic, though, right? Or is it Portuguese?
No, Portuguese. So we were colonized by the Portuguese. So we do have that in our descent.
That's just, you know, a little bit of background for anyone that was wondering what Cape Verde meant. Just want to make sure everybody understands. So you talked about some of the challenges that you experienced growing up in the inner city. Talk to me through when you said that you started feeling this passion, and, you know, your culture, of course, was really education focused, and you got a few degrees, you know. So let's talk about your school life, your experiences in school, some of the things that supported you through your endeavors once you realized this was a passion for you.
Yeah. You know, I was one of those kids that while I have like these degrees under my belt, school was never I loved learning. I think we need to suss out like learning in the institution of school. I did not like school. I did not like the idea of being confined to this space and you need to do it this way. It felt like I was being trained to be like this little, you know,
homogenized package or something.
Right, yeah. So I never liked that part of school, but I loved learning, and I loved you know, physical activity. I loved anything artistic, so I really loved art classes. I loved classes where I could express myself. Joined a lot of like theater related things, art related sort of things. Did things after school, so it felt like my learning was really from my environment. It was really from the things that I was doing outside of school that built sort of my character, I think. I did, you know, community engagement after school. I did community service after school. I was part of a editorial sort of this magazine called Teen Voices. I don't know if they're around anymore, but they were called Teen Voices. And I was like a teen editor, you know, peer leader. I loved doing stuff like that growing up. And I think that's the stuff that really, you know, built my character and really kind of pushed me into this like helping field. But some of like you know, I was Cape Verdean, so my family didn't, you know, they didn't really speak English that well growing up. My mother passed away when I was 10, so I grew up with my mother until she passed away when I was 10, my sister and I. And my grandparents came from Cape Verde and they helped to raise my sister and I with my aunt and my uncle. And so I was adopted by them. And there were some challenges with that. And I think, you know, growing up and straddling these two cultures, being, you know, bicultural, having the Cape Verdean background, but growing up in the United States, there was a lot of things that sort of clashed that made childhood difficult. When you're learning two languages, you're learning two worlds and learning how to be in two worlds. I think that was difficult. And then you toss in all the other systematic stuff around you, the isms and everything. You know, that was hard to navigate for a while. So I had my own sort of, you know, set of traumas. I'm a very transparent person, so I do speak on some of the things that I've gone through, because I think that helps other people to speak about that as well. But I've dealt with sexual abuse, I've dealt with sexual assault. So a lot of those things were very difficult for me to kind of deal with as a child, and trying to make sense of it, like trying to make sense of loss, trying to make sense of community violence around you, trying to make sense of, you know, sexual abuse, and trying to make sense of growing up without my father being truly present. A lot of that really, it had to build something in me, and it built a lot of resiliency. So I was able to have a lot of people around me who were really supportive. If it wasn't family, it was, you know, counselors at school, it was my peers outside of school, it was mentors. So there was adults that I would sort of gravitate towards that I found really supportive. So a lot of those things were really, really key in my upbringing.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned that I want to kind of unpack a little bit more is resiliency. Now, when you and I met in person, we talked about resiliency a little bit. I don't know if you remember, but I was saying it that, you know, the urban culture has become so resilient that they don't know that they're damaged. You know, a lot of us don't recognize that we got issues. You know, a lot of us just kind of cope and we have to cope some more and we have to cope some more. So there's never really a, you know, unpacking of mental anguish, of trauma. And most times, more often than not, that trauma comes from something very core, like within our household, within our family. So we don't recognize that as something to work through. We just kind of get over, you know. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that because, and I guess this is a good segue to your company. You know, you've been in mental health for over 10 years now. Like I said, you're a clinical social worker. Now you have Holistically Yours, which is now your company, and I want to make sure that I read it right. Holistically Yours, right? So it's a holistic psychotherapist and wellness center, and you are the coach for this organization. When it comes to resiliency, and one of the main reasons why I really wanted to talk to you, because you're a think outside the box person, which I love, you know. I want to know what you feel about that kind of trauma that gets brought on to particularly people in urban communities, but people in general too, you know, I'm sure. But for us specifically, where there's such a stigma on going and getting help and talking through it, what do you feel about resiliency, or what kind of advice, how would you speak to us being so resilient?
Yeah, you know, I think resiliency is just part of our DNA. When we think about generational trauma, and we just think about, like, you know, we have always had that embedded in our DNA. Granted, like, I understand, like, my history to a certain extent, that I have both colonial background and I also have, you know, slavery background in me, given that my people were colonized by the Portuguese. So I get that part. But I know that deeply embedded in my DNA is this resiliency, that even if I didn't have these experiences in this lifetime that helped to create some of that resiliency, it's part of my DNA because my people had that. My people had suffering. And so what happens, and I think this is what I see a lot in my practice with people, is we sometimes tune in and tap into that suffering part of our DNA, that resiliency part doesn't get a chance to really get turned on, and it doesn't get a chance to get tuned up until we get to a point where we can see that, we can understand that. So my hope and my goal is, with the people that I serve in my private practice, because I do both psychotherapy, and we'll talk about the wellness center at some, you know, during this, but in my psychotherapy practice, where I'm doing one-on-one with people, it's really talking with them about that. It's really pointing out, like, oh, that's suffering. Like, I get it. That's how you lived your life. You did that all the time. And this is what you're used to. This is what you saw the people before you, the generations before you doing this. This is what you saw your mother, your father, people around you in your neighborhood doing. But that's suffering. And we need to name it. We need to name it as such. We need to be able to recognize that's what it is. We also need to recognize that that's not all you. Like, that's stuff that comes from what you learned. It comes from conditioning. It comes from the world around you. It comes from the fact that you are this person who's this shade, and there's stuff that's going to come with that as well. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's explore that. Let's really name it. Let's bring it to the forefront so we can really process it and look at it. And then let's talk about how you have this other part of you that is so key in your healing and growth, because growth and healing are two different things as well. You know, I think we can grow and we can really learn lessons, but it takes applying those lessons and really doing it over and over again for healing to really become a part of your presence.
I really love that you said to identify the suffering. You know, one of the things that I was thinking about is a friend of mine who was raised in a very violent atmosphere. They were raised by their mom and their grandmother. Both were very, very violent. Both come from, slavery. And so they were taught violence. But my friend will continue to say, well, no, it wasn't my mom. And I'm like, but it was, and I think it's hard for me to say it because I'm not a psychologist, so people don't really, they just think I'm being kind of judgy, but it's like, being able to identify like that was a trauma, even though you love your mom, even though you want to protect her, even though, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but if you're trying to work on you, I do think it is really, really super important to be able to identify like, she caused this level of trauma. And even if I forgive her, I still need to go through whatever process that I'm sure you can speak more to be able to heal that and to work through whatever that effect of that is. Because when we've been traumatized, what I learned is that the way that for females particularly, we can cope with that kind of trauma through drug abuse, through alcohol abuse, through promiscuity, through things that, you wouldn't even be thinking, oh, I'm damaged and I'm doing this. You're thinking, I'm just out here living my life and doing my thing. And it's like, well, there are conditions that were caused in you based on things that you've gone through. And maybe we should unpack some of that because, one of the things that I really want to promote on a show and promote just in general to people that may be listening in is to really understand what it means, first of all, to love yourself, what it means first, before we ever start applying it, we need to know what that means, know how we want to be treated, know how we want to treat other people, understand the responses that we're looking for from people, and even setting those expectations on people, letting them know like, hey, this is not what I'm looking for from you. This is what I need. This is the thing. And being okay with having these discussions with people, especially people of our own skin color, because I find that it becomes a judgment or a criticism to most people. Like, well, you're criticizing me. You're judging my life. And it's like, I'm really just trying to help.
Yeah, right.
And I think it makes it hard.
It does, yeah. And trauma is such a heavy word, and it comes with it, it comes with connotation. And so a part of the work that I do with people when they don't want to see, accept, and not ready to really identify with trauma, quote, the word, just the word, not even like the experience, but just the word.
Right.
It's really normalizing it, and it's crazy that we have to normalize trauma, but we do. And I think part of it is that we've often seen and thought that trauma was some of the things that I'm talking about that I've experienced, right? Like the abuse and violence and community violence. We think that it's this traumatic accident. We often think it's like these big scale things, and we forget about like the little traumas, like the little things that happen chronically that then becomes traumatic. Because our body, and those little things are things like job loss, a difficult breakup, familial issues, school problems, any sort of like injustice. Those little things, when they add up, because those are the things that we're used to, right? Like we're used to those things happening every day, and we just kind of deal with it. But it's almost like a callus on the bottom of your feet. It hardens and it grows, and your body can't tell the difference because we're still, as much as we have evolved, we're still thinking that we're being chased by some mammoth in the middle of like, the desert. And so our body still responds to stress in the same ways. And when we have stress that's been chronic and compounded in that way, you do have, that's trauma, and your body responds to it like it would if you had gotten into a big car accident, but it's just a breakup.
You're actually helping me to appreciate something about myself is, I think that I have, with dating specifically, I think that I've been in way more, and I'm sure many women can attest and relate, way more toxic and bad negative relationships with men than positive ones. And so now at this point in my life, I'd like to be in a relationship, but I do feel like I have a lot of issues around being vulnerable, being able to trust on a level of vulnerability. Like I bail out. Like I'm like, oh wait, what? It's really difficult for me You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and it becomes your own, you know, you create more problems for yourself because now it's something that I actually want, where before I wasn't really looking too much. But I was a serial dater. It was like, oh, you don't want to, then I'm on to the next. Oh, you don't want, you know, I would go and go and go. And I finally gave myself time to say, wait a minute, you know, what do you really want? What are you really looking for? And even if and when I find that thing, I'm still very like, nope, I don't think so. And I don't know. And, you know, so I go through that still, you know. So it's interesting to hear you kind of break it down like that, like, you know, just the compounding of these issues that really just affect you going into your adulthood. And if you don't get the right counseling, the right therapy, or someone that understands it first and foremost. I mean, this is the thing that, you know, is super important, you know, finding the right person to speak to about these things, you know. I think that having someone that's relatable, you know, someone that looks like us, someone that has been affected by some of the same things and has gone through these things, I think is super, super important. You know, my therapist, although she was great, she was a young white girl from Vermont. So there was a lot of times when I would talk to her and she would tell me, I think you'd be really effective at bridging gaps. She was encouraging me to go into therapy, which I thought was really funny because she's like, you just understand your community so well. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't understand clinical psychology. And it's, you know, and so that's where I need your professional experience, you know, to kind of help me break through these things. And again, she was super helpful. She taught me some mindfulness techniques and things like that I can really help other people with, but really breaking down to even something so small that she wouldn't understand, like what you just said, like the compounding of different small things in your life that you go through, you know, especially being raised in the hood, you know, like there are things that you just don't see as an issue, you know, but you are affected. Yeah. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and you know, women, because you're talking about some of that, like we're taught to be strong. Like you know, they were messaging that I heard, and the thing is too is, you know, when I talk with people about their childhood, it's not to demonize their upbringing, right? Like your parents knew what they knew because of what they learned, and so it only gets really passed down. It's not a matter of looking at them and saying, "Damn, you fucked up." It's not about that. Right. It's about saying, "What did I learn from them?" And so when we think about women and what we're taught, like Kay Vernon is also taught to be strong women, right? Like we are taught to be that strong Black woman. That's something that we strive for, which is it's so beautiful to see us in that strength. But we also have to understand that comes with some stuff. It comes with some weight where, you know, we are less likely to be emotionally open and expressive. And it's funny because it doesn't even look like that, right? Like it looks like we are expressive. We will tell you what
we're so nurturing. We cook, we clean, we're doing all this stuff.
Right, we do all of that. We're strong. But yet we suffer silently. We suffer within. Even when our girlfriends are going through some of the same things as us, we feel like, I don't really want to tell them because I don't want them to judge me. Right. I don't want to open up. You know, someone's going to say something and then I got to deal with this. I broke up with this man 3-4 times. Now I'm going back. And if I tell them, they're going to say this. And so I get that, right? So we put on this sort of strong mask. But that strong mask is also to our detriment. Because of that, we don't seek support, and it doesn't necessarily always need to come from a therapist. You know, I'm a therapist with a therapist, but I will say that therapy does this thing, especially in our society and in our culture, where it likes to pretend like it's the only thing that's going to be able to help you, right? And that's not true, right? And that's part of my work with decolonizing therapy too, is that healing can look like your spiritual advisor. It can look like your faith leader. It can look like, if you're indigenous, it can look like your tribe. It can look a lot of different ways. And so we need to be open to exploring some of those different ways of healing, of doing growth work, because therapy is great, but it's not the only thing that might be able to help you.
And that is, I want to just cut you off because I think it's a beautiful segue to start talking about holistically yours, holistically you. Holistically you. So let's talk about the company because you are pretty multifaceted. Another one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you so badly because I remember when we spoke in person, you said something to me, and I don't want to misquote you, but you spoke about how wellness is not just one thing, you know, just like the point that you're making now. It's not just the mental health stuff. It's not just like going to get your hair or your nails done. It's not just this one thing. Do you remember that? So
there's the self-care. Yep.
Yes. And I loved that so much. You know, I want you to let us know, you know, what you do in your company and just kind of break down the different services that you provide, what it really means, so people that, you know, would not otherwise understand, they have a good knowledge around what
Yeah. I think in order for me to talk about like holistically you, I kind of have to talk about like how it was birthed.
Sure,
So,
yes.
So this is something that I've been wanting to do since like undergrad. So in undergrad, I recognized that when I was starting, like my stuff was starting to surface. I went through like a depressive sort of time in college where a lot of and I had therapy when I was younger because some of the stuff that I had gone through, but I hadn't healed, right? Like I had grown, I had done a lot of work, but I hadn't really healed. And so in college, all of that stuff surfaced and I went through a depressive episode. And when I wanted to talk with other people, I wanted to talk to some of my peers, specifically Cape Verdeans, because you know, sexual abuse and sexual assault, intimate partner violence, that is really high in our community. And there was no platform for me to say like, hey, I want to talk to my other, you know, Creole sisters and let's talk about this because I'm sure you're going through it as well. So I decided I was going to create this program and, you know, really just work with Creoles in this way where we could heal and grow together and be like sisterhood, because we don't always do a good job of being sisters. And so I really wanted to do that. And flash forward, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go into this kind of work without getting a graduate degree. So I go to school, get a graduate degree. I start working. I'm in Columbia Road at Uphams, and I'm working with my community. I'm doing the work that I've wanted to do. I'm serving in the ways that I want to serve. And my supervisor at the time was this white woman from like Western Mass, well-meaning, well-intentioned, really smart, like really clinically like sound and smart. So I learned a lot from her. But I was working with this one guy who, from the hood as well, had been shot like 9 or 10 times. Had his like just deeply disturbed, and I got it, and I understood why. And she says to me, you know, I'm having a hard time really getting him to open up, and I knew why, of course, right? Like I'm some therapist, you're gonna, you know, trust me. We already have issues trusting the medical field anyway. And she says to me, well, you should call his girlfriend and try to get more information about him. I was like, I can't call his girl. We don't do that.
Right, we don't do that.
I knew, like, the minute that came up for me, and I was like, we can't do that. And I was like, wait a second. There's a part of therapy that people that like the people who taught me, or the people who wrote these books that I'm reading don't see. They didn't get. They don't understand. I can't call someone's girl and have to be like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about it? Because I'm sorry, I can't do that. We don't do that. That's not appropriate.
It's unwritten, but it's for real.
Do that.
Right.
And so that was something that I put in my back pocket. And then I go on to serve as a supervisor with the Department of Mental Health, state level. And so things went down that kind of made me feel like, oh, I'm only here because you guys needed the representation. Okay, got it. And then it became really corporate, and there was a lot of politics and bureaucracy, and I just didn't like that. Then I went to Brooklyn, and at this point I was going into private practice, and I was in Brooklyn making really great money, and that felt real good. Yeah. Then I was like, I'm not serving people, and they can't access me here. Like they had to take a couple of trains and buses to get here. This isn't okay. I don't like this. And so then in 2017, I launched Holistically You. I launched it because I felt like we needed something that wasn't just going to look at mental health in the ways that we've always seen it. It was also going to talk about mind-body connection. It was also going to talk about wellness. It was going to decolonize wellness as well. And that wellness doesn't look like you drinking green juice on some mountain somewhere in some yoga pose. That's not what wellness is going to look like for us all the time, right? And so I needed it to be relatable. I needed it to be I keep tossing out this word decolonizing, but I needed it to be decolonized. I needed it to be in the hood, in the middle of like all of this.
Yeah.
And I say all this because I'm in Dorchester still. I still live in the hood. I let go of that narrative a long time ago that I wanted to get out of the hood. It's not my narrative anymore. I love the hood. I have no problem, you know. Anyway, so then I decided launch Holistically You, and initially I didn't want to do therapy. What I wanted to do was more coaching, and I wanted to bring my therapeutic background into it, but I didn't want to do just one-on-one therapy because I was having a hard time with it. I was struggling with being a therapist because of all the stuff that I had learned that I felt needed to be deconditioned. I had to unlearn a lot of my training. And so I started working with women, specifically women of color, and doing weight management with them because I have my own story with weight management. And I started to talk with them, and my whole thing was, let's release the weight underneath the physical weight. So let's really get at the emotional weight that's weighing you down, and that's causing all of this, you know, excess body weight that you don't need. That's getting in the way, because for women of color, like, we are at the bottom of many major health outcomes, and that's largely due to our diet and lifestyle habits. We're at the highest risk for obesity, depression, anxiety, heart disease, hypertension. And so I really wanted to work with women so that I could help them to figure out, like, self-care isn't just getting your hair done, getting your nails done, a spa day here and there, drinking with your girls, brunch at Cure, whatever, you know, whatever's throwing brunch at the time, garage, whatever. It's not just that. That self-care meant you really needed to sit with self. And so sitting with self is really uncomfortable for so many of us, especially people who, you know, who have dealt with like weight management stuff. Sitting in your body, integrating into your body, embodying your body is so difficult for us. And as women, and especially Black women, we've been taught to distrust our body. We've been taught to dislike our body. We've been taught so many things. And I love that there's so many movements in the last couple of years that have helped us to build a better relationship with our body. But that was a part of it. And so I really strive to teach people to sitting with self has to be a practice where you are learning who you are, what makes you who you are, what experience have led to yourself, that capital self, the capital S self. And from that, I kind of just, I found that the coaching was I was only gonna be able to work with a very small population of women. So then I was like, you know, okay, let's just do full, you know, let's just go into therapy full time. And so did that up until about 2000. So in January, I expanded my business into a wellness center. Because I found that I was only working with a small population of women. And I also learned that there's so many dope women in Boston who's doing, in surrounding areas, who's doing just great work. You know, whatever their work is, and they don't even have to have any letters before their name or behind their name, but they're doing amazing work. They're doing sound therapy, they're doing Reiki, they're doing spiritual work, they're doing counseling, they're doing artistry work. And so whatever it was that they were doing, I wanted to have a platform to do that with other women. And so Holistically You now has expanded into a wellness center where I'm offering workshops and classes. I have a book club. I have one offering that I'm actually really excited about is called Community Nights. But it's spelled CALM, like calm, so community nights in that way. And what it is bringing people together. You know, I don't know how often this is going to happen because the world closed, so I had to put all of that on hold. But bringing people together to find calmness, because we have a hard time with stillness. We have a hard time with rest and relaxation. And we can always talk about what goes into that, the history of some of that with us. But because we have a difficult time with that, that also is a barrier to accessing self. And so I wanted to be able to have different practitioners come in and teach us how to access self and teach us how to find calmness and stillness smack dab in the middle of Nubian Square in Roxbury, where there's chaos around us. I wanted to find calmness.
I love that.
What else? So those are some of the offerings that I have.
Yeah.
Fireside chats. Yeah, so that's sort of like the evolution of holistically you and where we are today.
Yeah, no, I definitely love it. I love the community room, that idea. You know, I told you when we spoke about it in person, like, I want to be involved. I want to come.
Yeah.
That it's awesome to be able to sit around other people that are looking for that same thing. I think that that's one of the key things is, you know, being around people that are really like-minded, because a lot of times I feel like, you know, we will go to our girlfriends or, you know, whatever supports we have in place, and they might not be in the same place. So you're not getting the level of support that you may need. And it may come across as even a criticism, like, why you think you need to do that? Why are you trying to do, you know, becomes a push towards something negative. And then you start feeling like, well, maybe I don't need that. You know, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Maybe I'm crazy for trying to do that. So I think it's super smart, yeah, to have like a group of women that want, you know, that are sharing the same kind of goals in their own personal space of saying, you know, I need to get to this place, and to be encouraged by other women that they may not even know to accomplish that. I think that that's amazing.
Yeah, because we go to all these, you know, we go to all these workshops and conferences, and they're great. But sometimes what happens is you don't build community from that. Like you learn what you learn. You might leave, you might get a girlfriend's number here and there, but you might not fortify that relationship. And so I wanted to have a space where you could be around people who look like you, who also wanted to do that work. Because one of the things, and it's such a, I love that you brought that up, because it's such it's an ugly side of growth and healing, is that people around you might not appreciate where you're going, and
or don't want you to go there. they like you right where you're at, you know?
Yeah, I've had people call, you know, say to me like, oh, you're holier than thou, or you think you're better than us. And I'm like, no, it's not my heart to be like that anyway. It's just not, it's not my heart. But I'm also not going to let you get in the way of my healing and my growth. And so that means I need to draw boundaries. That means that even when I struggle, even when I shake, even when I tremble to tell you like, this is what I need, I still need to be able to do that, because I need that for myself.
Yeah.
And it sucks that that happens, but it does. And so I want that space to be a space that's going to be brave and safe for people.
Again, you know, I definitely agree. Like I said, you know, one of the really important things for me is to help people understand what it looks like to really love themselves. And I think that being able to go, first and foremost, admit that, you know, you got things, you got issues. You know, we all do. You know, it's not a judgment. You know, we really want to take the shame out of getting treatment, you know, and I think that that's one of the things that you and I kind of spoke about before too. It's like taking that shame away, you know, allowing people to understand that this is what it looks like to love yourself, to actually go through the process of healing, to be able to identify, you know, the different traumas that we've experienced in our past, and how, you know, the way that we were exposed, who exposed these things to us, how we were affected by these things, and what we can now learn from these things as we grow into our adulthood, and especially when and if we become parents, you know, because you don't want to pour that same thing into your child. And I think that was one of the things for me, especially when I decided to go to therapy. It wasn't because, you know, someone recommended it. It was because I started seeing certain actions that I was taking that I did not feel good about my son seeing. And I said, something's, you know, this, like, how can you be doing this and not feel good about, like, how are you making decisions consciously about things that you're ashamed of? Like, what are you doing? You know, and so it was kind of that made me say, wait a minute, pause, like something has to give. Like, maybe I'm not expressing myself the right way, or maybe I'm not talking to the right people, but I need to go get something. And, you know, again, therapy really helped me to understand why it was so necessary. And when I went, it's funny because once I completed therapy, a lot of my friends and even family was like, therapy was the best thing. I'm like, I never even knew you went to therapy. So it wasn't until I started saying that I went through it that they were like, oh, me too. And I'm like, you could have told me that when you saw me struggling. So I still think there's a really strong stigma on it. And I think that it's important to really break that stigma down. And I love that you said that it's not, you know, it's not in your heart to be judgmental. When you do have knowledge and I'm a super high empath, right? So I legitimately care. So when I have the knowledge, I legit want you to have it. You know, I am trying to help you. And it's not a place of judgment. It's not a place of criticism. Like, honestly, I don't even care. If that's what you choose to do with your life, that's fine. But I feel like it's my responsibility and my calling to say, hey, you got the information, go share it. You cannot hold on to it. You have to go out here and you have to share this information. So I love that you think the same way. You have a strong clinical background. You are able to help. And so what advice, I'm going to ask you, would you give to people that are interested in working with you, like that want to be impacted by your business, that want to come into the workshops, that want to, I mean, obviously we're closed right now, but what advice would you give them? How can they reach you? I want you to talk about, you know, them being able to actually get in touch with you even now.
Yeah. So I refuse to go virtual right now. Like I feel like I just don't want to do that. That's not the direction right now. But when we do open back up, because right now the center is closed just for safety. But when we do open back up, I want people to know that if they feel like they have a platform, whatever that platform is for you, I don't care what it looks like. If you feel like it's going to aid in other people's growth, if you feel like it's going to aid in other people's healing, and it's going to, it falls under the umbrella of wellness, and wellness is such a large scope. It falls under mental health. I want you to know that, like, I'm opening my doors to you. I'm allowing, that space for the community to come together and we learn from each other. Because we heal best when we heal in community. And I want them to know that door is open. And if they wanted to work with me, like one-on-one in terms of my therapeutic work, I want them to know that I'm not your traditional therapist. So there are certain things that I incorporate in my work with people because of the people that I'm serving. I know that you might be coming in and talking about, you're having relationship problems. Well, let's talk about how you're sleeping. Let's talk about the foods that you're eating, because I have that background also doing integrative nutrition counseling. Let's talk about the foods that you're eating. Let's talk about where you live and who you live with. Let's talk about your upbringing. Let's talk about, your beliefs, those core beliefs, those conditioning. Let's talk about all of those things, because it's not just telling you, oh, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should do that. It's also like, how did we get here? Like, how did we get here? And if you're not sleeping well, it doesn't matter what I'm telling you to do in your relationship. You're not sleeping well. That's going to impact so many different health components. And so we need to get you back on track with sleeping. You're not eating well, but guess what? Food and mood has a huge relationship with each other. 90% of our serotonin is created in our gut system. And so many of us have gut issues. So many of us have GI issues. And so it's no wonder that depression and anxiety go hand in hand with stomach issues, because sometimes it's the foods that we're eating. Sometimes it's not taking care of our gut system. So it's talking about all of those things. So it's letting people know that when you come to me, we're not just going to be talking about how you're feeling. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things.
I think that a lot of people would actually appreciate that more, because it takes a minute to really, it's easier. It seems a little bit less connected to say, oh, well, no, I don't sleep all the time, or I get up this time, than to say, I was abused, right? Like, it seems a little bit more of a gradual kind of relationship and, smart,
We'll get there. We'll get there.
I love that. I want to take a step back, because you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to talk about, and you said the word a couple of times, is decolonizing. Can you explain what you mean by that in your coaching?
Yeah, sure. So decolonizing is something that I've been trying to incorporate more and more in the work that I'm doing. That was something I had felt at the core of me. Something ain't right with what that professor just taught me. Something ain't right with some of these books that I'm reading. I don't see myself in some of it. I also recognize that might not be the way that my people are living. So who am I to impose this clinical background on them when that's not their reality? And so the more I started to really feel into that feeling, I started coming across because this will happen. Like things will start falling into your lap because it will just start to align. And I started coming across more and more people who are talking about decolonization, whatever that was, decolonization of wellness, decolonization of mental health, decolonization of medicine. But people kept talking about it, and I was like, what is that? Like, what is decolonization? And the way that I've come to understand it is that much of what we've been given, much of what we've been taught came from this colonial perspective. And so when we think about that, we have to think about what happened during colonial times, like what was taken away from us as people. You think about indigenous people, what was taken from them as a result of colonization. There's a lot of rage, there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of anguish, there's a lot of this pain there. And we still carry that with us because it's in our lineage, because it's in our DNA. We still carry that with us today. And so some of what we're feeling is actually like generational leftover, like residual from colonization. And so it's gone back and saying, so one example, like a concrete example, in clinical work, we're taught to tell people how often they should be coming to therapy. That therapy is weekly, right? And so it's me imposing my expertise, my authority on the person who's oppressed at this moment, right? That makes no sense to me.
Right.
I should be able to say to the person that I work with, you choose how often you want to come in. You tell me what works for you. You tell me, when you're ready to come to therapy.
Right.
I can't impose that on you. So that's one example of how I let people choose. When they schedule with me, I tell them pick whatever works for you.
Right.
Now, if I see something, I'm like, I think we should come in more often. It's because you also see in yourself that you want that added support, not because I told you that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's sort of
yeah, it definitely does. When you were first saying it, the way that I was thinking about it was that, you had mentioned that some of the things that you were learning, it didn't kind of jive right with you. You understood that things weren't really as relatable based on the books versus like what your even own personal experiences were. And I think that it's so good that you have that kind of standard of decolonization in your therapy, because I think that that's part of why, and this is just my personal opinion, the stigma is so alive still, because it is based on how this colonized view of what therapy is for crazy people, or for people that are like, all of these negative connotations that surround what it looks like. And honestly, it is such a generational thing that we've had to experience, again, with building our resilience and not coping with our trauma and all of these things, that I feel like being able to decolonize the thought of therapy, right? Just the idea that surrounds it is a really big step into a lot of people really understanding, like, this is probably something that I need. This is probably something that's going to be a benefit.
Right,
So
right, yeah.
I love that. I really, really do.
I want people to, it is, and I want people to recognize that there is such a thing as post-traumatic slavery syndrome, or post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Where we're still carrying some of that with us. There's that piece where people wanted to, folks who are listening today, look into that. There's some amazing videos on YouTube. I can't remember what this doctor's name, but I think she's a psychologist and also a professor, but she does this amazing job at like explaining this. And then it opens your eyes and you're like, I guess I can see why that would happen. And then part of like the colonization too is, I struggle with the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. I struggle with all diagnoses because how am I going to diagnose? Like some of these things are like,
you don't know yet.
Right. And so some of these things are like, I don't get wrapped up in diagnosing with the folks that I work with. But I struggle with post-traumatic stress syndrome, because I feel like there's nothing post about my trauma, right? Like so many of us continue to grow up in the very, we continue to thrive and survive and grow up in the very same environments that our trauma sort of, was born.
That's right.
So there's nothing post about that. Like I continue to be traumatized every day I go out there. And so we really have to be able to look at PTSD too and say like, okay, maybe we need to start looking at this in a different way. Maybe we just need to bring awareness to it in a different way where people can understand that like you might go through something, it doesn't mean it's gonna go away right away and you're gonna get healed and you're gonna move on. Like we have to recognize that sometimes we're still continuing to live in those toxic relationships, those environments that aren't helpful, that job that you hate, that that weird relationship with your siblings, weird relationship with your parents, like all of that continues to be a part of you every day. So that trauma doesn't go away. That stress isn't like, there's nothing post about it. You're still in it.
Right.
So there's a lot that, like, for those people who are listening, to just, my thing is empower yourself with the knowledge. Don't just take it from me. Take what you can today. What doesn't sit with you, chuck it. And you do your own research. You go out there, you sit with yourself, you do your own reflection, you really figure out what works for you.
Now, I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are listening that feel this is of great benefit to them to incorporate into their life. But I want to also talk a little bit to those who are listening to you saying, I want to be like her. I want to do this kind of work, or I want to get involved in this kind of work. What type of advice would you give to a young Black girl or boy that's interested in actually learning about coaching or wellness or therapy in terms of school? Like, what direction would you point them in, say, if they don't have the same strong family guidance of education? Where would you kind of give them some guidance towards that?
I would say that, firstly, begin with yourself, before you start thinking, because I think that this is something that you'll know that this is the direction that you want to go into. So because you recognize that that's the direction you want to go, because you work on yourself. And so sit with yourself. Understand who you are. Your story is going to be so powerful in the work that you do. So understand your story. Write your narrative. Know what that looks like through and through. Understand what that relationship with yourself looks like. And if you feel like you're struggling in developing that, then that's where you also seek the support from people around you to say, like, I'm working on this. I'd like to know a little bit more about myself. Can you help me through this? Seek mentors, because they'll be really great at seeing you and seeing the stuff in you and pulling that out so that you can build a relationship with that part of yourself too. I think doing that work is so important and so key. And if you want to start early as like high school, that's amazing. And then you want to figure out, well, who do I want to work with? Like, who's the population that I want to work with? Because that's going to make a difference in your track, like your educational track. So I'll say this, my formal education was really great at training me clinically. It was really great at getting me to understand theories and modalities. It was really great at opening me up to the world of psychology and the world of human behavior and the world of mindfulness and wellness and all of that. Formal education was great. But reading books outside of school, talking to people who were elders in my community, talking to people who were spiritual leaders in my community, faith leaders in my community, helped me to bring a different side of that work so that it wasn't so textbook and it wasn't so green. Like, I couldn't be just a green therapist. I needed to incorporate all the different avenues of life experience. And so I taught myself outside of school. I read books. I literally just ordered 11 books this week so that I could go through them and read and really, really strengthen my knowledge in different things. And so I would say that to them, learn yourself. Your relationship with yourself is going to be your greatest tool in this work anyway. It's not like you have a calculator. You're no mathematician with a calculator. You're no, your tool is yourself. That's right. And so working on yourself is going to be really key. Figure out what formal education is going to look like, and then, teach yourself outside of that formal education. And find mentors, find people in the community who look like you, who are where you want to go, and seek their support.
I love that. So, Vanessa, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I love talking to you. It was from the day that we met, man. I told her from the day we met that we're soul sisters, you know, and she didn't disagree. So yeah. Your energy is awesome as ever. You know, I love that you're so transparent and so willing to share, you know, not just your backstory, but also what you're actively doing now. If someone did want to reach out to you, did you want to give an email or a website where they can take a look at what you do or anything like that?
Yeah, so I actually just I'm relaunching my new website so that it can kind of match the services that I'm doing now. But my website is www.holisticallyyouinc.com. And if you put that in show notes, I guess they'll be able to see the spelling.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram as holisticallyyouinc, and my email will be also on my Instagram, but it's Vanessa at holisticallyyouinc. So those are the different ways that they can reach me.
Yeah, I love it. And for everybody out there listening, watching today, I hope that you reach out to her if you see that there is some value or some benefit to you that you can personally have, particularly people in the Boston region, but even, you know, outside of that, I'm sure you work with people, you know, that are further away as well. So, you know, people that really can relate to what she's talking about, the type of coaching that she does. I love that she's so incorporative and I really, really appreciate one of the best things is the advice that you're giving to people that may want to get into the field, really understanding who you are first, and then aligning yourself with people, sharers like Vanessa. You know, she is a sharer. You know, I don't want to impress her with, you know, a million people trying to, you know, get her to mentor them. But, you know, she is a sharer. She's a very open person to and I think that is one of the things as it relates to even your community workshops, that is one of the strongest suits to be able to walk in those same shoes that you're speaking about too. You are definitely a gem in our community. And so I'm excited for you to open back up. Like I said, I want to definitely be aware of the workshops.
Oh, I'll definitely let you know.
Yeah, and once we know, we'll make sure that you guys know too. We'll send you the information as well. So Vanessa, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you guys for listening in too. We will see you next time. Vanessa Santos with Holistically You.
Thank you.
Engage, no problem. Engage, motivate, and elevate. See you.
It is now time to elevate.
Time to motivate them.
Let's engage. It is now time to elevate.